So the topic of today's podcast is the business of happiness, and we have nobody better than Mr. Vinod talking about it. So thank you for coming, and we'd love to know a little bit about Deki. How you started.
Thank you for having me over, Devaki. It's a fantastic topic, one that's close to my heart that we're going to talk about today.
Yeah.
But first, a brief introduction. So, I always like to say that I wear more than one hat. If you have a head like mine, then you better have more than one hat. So, the primary hat is that of a businessman, as you rightly described. Deki Electronics Limited is now 40 years old, of which I've been with Deki for 30 years. So, I'm a second generation entrepreneur. The company was started by my father-in-law and mother-in-law back in '84 with a Japanese collaboration.
Okay.
And a little later, almost 10 years later, I joined the company, and I will talk about that in a little bit. The second hat is I also figured that industrial policy in India was being driven by people who did not know enough about business. And hence many agreements were signed, for example, the WTO agreement way back in 1998 in our sector called Information Technology Agreement 1, that basically rendered most of our components and electronics at zero duty, which in my opinion was not a very wise thing to do at that point of time. But then we began to reflect in the industry saying, how can we change this?
Yeah.
And so I decided to spend a lot of my time in policy advocacy, trying to understand policy, its impacts on business, and then hopefully make a change. And we are very happy, I'm very happy that we took that path over these years. So I have had a role to play in several industry associations. That's the second hat. The third one is where I decided to study business a little bit, and then later begin to teach it to students, to consultants. So did a very interesting program called Train the Trainer, Train the Consultant. 200 consultants were trained by my co-author Hans Verhulst and me. We wrote a book called Value Magics on the value of business.
Yeah.
And so that's the third hat that I wear.
And since we're talking about the business of happiness, often people tell us you must do what you love, but a lot of us are not in the position to make those choices. So what is your perspective on that?
Yeah, so you've got to be incredibly lucky to be able to do something that you love.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about it, and not many of us are lucky to do that.
Yeah.
However, I would strongly urge anybody considering a career in his own business as a startup or even as an entrepreneur, be aware that the moments you spend where you're not doing something you like, love may be a strong word, are wasted moments, right? So as long as you're aware that that's not what you really want to do, you will make some efforts to change that.
Yeah.
And I agree with you that sometimes it's not easy to change, you are stuck in something. But I think the more you tell yourself that this is not what I want to do, the more the chances you will find something that you like to do or love to do. Having said that, it's not that there is a dream job or a dream business waiting there.
Yeah.
For everybody, I mean, what you see today might look like a successful business.
Yeah.
There's a lot of hard work that
Absolutely.
not only me, my colleagues, 600 plus colleagues have put in. And I'm sure that not each one of them has enjoyed every single day at work.
Yeah.
So there are days that you don't like it. But I think in the slightly longer term of things, if you can see a roadmap that leads to something that you will begin to be interested in, begin to love, that's the one that you need to pursue. If you are sure that you are in the wrong company, their value systems don't match with what you do, you don't agree with what you're doing for a daily living, you are selling something that you won't buy yourself, then stop doing that. Right?
Yeah, and you started, you trained in hotel management, you then transitioned into a very different career. How is that for you? Is this your true calling, or did you really enjoy that as well and this just happened to come your way so you decided to take it on?
I haven't thought about my true calling, but if I were to, I'm just thinking. I trained in a completely different business called hospitality. And landed up in an engineering company, which was fascinating. And that was a quirk of destiny, but anyway, here I am. What I discovered very quickly is that in the hospitality business, for example, we were always trained that the customer, the guest is always right.
Yeah.
Right? And then, so to give you an example, I used to joke about this with my own colleagues at Deki. So if I were to, serve you a soup in a hotel, and you have a sip and you say, "Excuse me, sir, but the soup is cold," right? What would I do? Any hotel in the world, every single hotelier is trained to come and say, "I'm so sorry, ma'am. Can I get you? Can I heat it up for you? Can I get you something else?" And most likely, I'll have the authority to take it off your check, so I can delight you. That's the independence and freedom I get. What do we do in a typical engineering company? is that I will come to you and say, excuse me, you find it cold. I will come back to you with two things. One is a thermometer, which will probably be calibrated. And the second is a specification sheet that will say soup should be served at 78 degrees plus minus 4 degrees. And I will shove the thermometer there and I will get into a technical discussion with you, saying it was supposed to be at 74, it is at 74, so I don't know why you're finding it cold.
Yeah.
Right? Now, if we change that, I may be exaggerating this example a little bit, but lots of products that we buy today, lots of services that you are delivered today are made exactly like this.
Yeah.
You can speak to a credit card company and he or she has been trained to ask you a certain number of questions.
Yeah.
They are almost not listening to you.
And it's completely scripted.
Right. So I found that if you base a business on a culture of responsiveness, on a culture of customer centricity, you can actually change your own little world. And that's what we've done in the last 30 years. We were a 40 people company, now 640 people make capacitors. With that way of thinking and giving them the ownership of making that change. And I'm completely passionate, obsessed literally with this participative management business. Because everybody is the owner of a company.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? I always told them, look, as an owner, if things go well, I know that I will take away the largest share of profits, my car will become even bigger.
Yeah.
But if things go bad, then you guys, the 640 people, have more to lose than I have to lose.
Yeah.
So at least in loss, if not in profit, you are a bigger owner than I am.
Yeah.
You have so they have performed well, and then I always tell them those 40 people did something right. They created 16 jobs each, so we are 640.
Yeah.
If these 640 do exactly what those 40 did, we will be a 10,000 people company.
Yeah.
We may make more than capacitors,
Yeah.
but there will be employment, productive employment for 10,000 people.
And obviously, everyone talks a little bit about, you have to be a specialist in your industry and your years of experience matter. Of course, in this business now, you've been running it for the last 30 years and you have a lot of experience. But coming from hotel management into this, what were the important skills, aside from engineering, which is highly technical, that you thought really helped you? Or are the skills that are actually business agnostic?
I think the first and foremost, I won't describe it as a skill.
Yeah.
Let's say a value thing that I hold very dearly is what you would call, loosely we call it integrity, right? Or we use big words like ethics. What does it mean to anybody? To me, it means I do what I say and I say what I do.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that. Which means what? That the capacitors my company produces will deliver a certain amount of life, will be at a certain capacitance, will withstand a certain voltage, which is what we put in specifications.
Yeah.
There are some unsaid specifications that I will deliver on time, that I will continue to compete globally on a competitive price. This is what my customers expect me to do.
Yeah.
If I hold this dear and ask myself this question, the whole team asks this question every day, am I being completely in integrity with the purpose that we started out to be? I think that's the biggest thing that we need. Yeah. Unfortunately, we look around us and we find that CEOs that are doing well, companies whose share prices are going up, companies that are highly valued by society are today shortchanging their customer itself. Mileages are being wrongly reported by very large car companies. Sugar content in a milk food is being wrongly reported by large companies. Very celebrated CEOs of the world are today pompously declaring that they have just fired 10,000 people in their company. Now somebody needs to take a responsibility and step back and say, hey, who in the first place asked you to hire these 10,000 people if you didn't have an idea about how you were going to use them? So these pink slips, for example, should actually be a matter of shame.
Absolutely,
should actually result in some responsibility for the CEO who's running the show. Unfortunately, our system measures us very differently. Stock market, in fact, will give me a huge bonus as a CEO of a company that's just hired 10,000 people because they see it as efficiency. So to answer your question, so what am I saying? Is integrity, responsibility for what I do. This deep sense of just this consciousness that whatever we do has an impact on our employees, has an impact on society. Today we call it ESG and we call, carbon decarbonization. It all stems from one simple word. I think all kids in the world need to be educated in one simple thing, is what is their impact?
Correct.
On everything they do. When I say something rudely, how do I upset people? When I get angry, what happens? So I think every response, if I'm just becoming a little more conscious about what I do, everything else will flow. I will learn the tools and the techniques that are required to make it better. But deep down, if I know my customer is going to be unhappy with an idea, and I still take that decision, then I don't think I've got it right.
Yeah, and I think this is where you mentioned obviously that schools, or kids should learn this or have this moral compass, and it's something that unfortunately schools don't really focus on that much. They obviously have a generic thing, you should be honest, you should be responsible, environment friendly, so on and so forth, but there is no formal training on it as such. Do you think that's important to inculcate in some way through project based learning? So because one thing is, of course, you hear it and people always say you learn from experiences. So till they don't experience being in a real life situation in school, how do they, sort of align this with their goals and say, I must be honest, I must have integrity, I must do as I say. Do you think that this is something that schools must implement?
Well, schools can try their best, they do to honest. I mean, I don't know a school which doesn't have honesty is the best policy written there. However, children for sure, and even adults I would add to that, learn by example.
Exactly.
More than what we are taught, right?
Yeah.
So if I see my father lying to somebody about not being at home because he has to clear somebody's outstanding, it has happened with one of my customers.
Yeah.
Then that is what I will learn as a kid.
Yeah.
Right? If I have a company where I tell people, okay, forget the customer, let's use a worse quality of raw material, let's shortchange some quality processes, then that's what they will learn. I can put as many quality stickers as I want down, right?
Yeah.
So I think it is by example, by leaders will set examples, parents will set examples, teachers will set examples, and eventually as a society we need to set those examples.
Yeah.
We need to find the right champions, the stories we lead. So who was the one that I begin to become a fan of? Is it an actor who's into a drug habit?
Yeah.
Is it somebody who behaves himself terribly, who gets violent on the street? Or is it someone that does the things that we want him to do as a society, who drives safely, for example? Who doesn't drink and drive? As simple as that.
So, of course, I mean, this all comes down to, we're talking about work a little bit, but like business ethics that perhaps are part of your life, which are not just used in business, but in every sphere of life, whether it's a relationship, whether it's, you're on the street with your strangers. So business ethics is something that they must talk about from a young age, perhaps. Do you think that's what?
Yeah, so I would say not only in business, I think storytelling which tells them that people who do the right things eventually in the long term will work. We know some brands in India, some very large companies, I won't name them here, but there is a particular house of businesses that I would trust.
Yeah.
And they have today look at real estate.
Yeah.
10 years ago, real estate was actually with brands or with families, with family names. Most of them are jailed today, is because they were extending themselves.
Yeah.
So a person, a middle class citizen of this country who works all his life to get himself a 2 or 3 bedroom house, pays up their advance, doesn't get that money in time. Now there is RERA, the government has put in some legislation. It still falls short of what it should be. But fortunately, when that gap came in, we found that many houses whose name was related to trust, and so that is what they earned, right? So that brand name is very difficult to build. So what it tells us is that, look, success stories of companies like this must be told at a very young age. Of people like this must be told at a very young age. If our hero at a very young age is a very flamboyant businessman who's taking a lot of debt, who's running away from this country when he's called to question. If those are our heroes, then obviously we're going to follow the wrong leaders, the wrong stories. So I think it's a lot about storytelling, about following the right leaders and getting this message that what is success?
Correct.
That it is different from a flashy car or a big house. It is people who are able to hold their own, are passionate about what they do, and are willing to be held responsible. Or accountable.
And especially now, I mean, the whole idea of success has changed because of all these inflated valuations, and people talk about the businesses become more about, what the hoo-ha around it, which is all the PR and everything you read in the news, as opposed to really what the fundamental core value add of the business is. And hopefully that will change, with things, with people becoming more aware. I hope that this will change. And another thing, that everyone talks about is the training, which is super important. I mean, at least, for in any industry, everything is changing rapidly. You hire both white collar and blue collar people. What is the level of training that you have to put them through before they actually really are ready to start working?
So unfortunately, our education system, at least for an industry like ours, has largely failed us. What I mean by that is that the poor student and his parents or her parents who put in their hard-earned money and their hopes in a career, those students are not, and there's a sweeping statement, are not really prepared for the career ahead. At the same time, I think the industry is equally to blame, or the receiving, career, because we have not trained them, we have not bothered to have a dialogue with the academicians, with people like you saying what needs to be taught, what value systems, what thought process. So obviously there's a huge gap. Unfortunately, in the industry we have measures, and these my guru Elihu Goldwright, he very famously said, "Tell me how you will measure me, and I will tell you how I behave." Right. So we measure today in society. We measure kids' success by their scores in the exam system. We measure success of people by the salaries they earn, or by the designations they hold. We measure countries by just their GDP, and I think these are all measures that really come short. And we need to rethink all these measures, right? So if I were to look at, so how do we train people? How do we get them up to that level of? So we have a very simple school, a training school, where young kids who are blue-collar workers who are coming to think. Similarly, we have a graduate training program that takes care of some of the people who are coming in at a diploma level or a graduate level. Unfortunately, their expectations, in my opinion, are fairly misplaced. So while the college is, even in the hotel school that I was in, my education trained me to become a hotel general manager from day one. The truth was that becoming a general manager was 20 years away from the time I started, right? So I had to do a lot of unlearning and become a dishwasher, a waiter, a chef, a commie, and then go up the ranks.
Correct.
By when I would have forgotten what I'd learned in college. So I think there is a certain amount of realistic training that is required at that level. And also I think like I said, the picture that we have of success in our minds itself needs to change. Whether it is of people, whether it's society, whether it's community, that needs to be. So that measurement, what I call the currency, or what is success, I think itself also needs some change.
But how can we change that? Because it's so deep-rooted in us from childhood, and I'm not talking about certain families or certain people who have different value systems, but overall the society says, you are successful based on A, B and C grades. How do you bring that shift? How do you change that in the thinking of people?
Yeah, so it is a slow process, but let us understand where did we land up here from. And I think our generation was a generation of survivors.
Correct.
So when we got out of school, typically, or college or whatever, our parents were in fact still struggling. So they had no choice. There was nothing called a choice of a career. They had to do something which got them a livelihood.
Absolutely,
Our generation was slightly better off. Maybe we could spend a couple of years still looking around. And there would be enough to eat. But there was no luxury at that stage.
Correct.
Your generation today, if I may say, is a generation which has more time. I mean, of course you want to earn your own living. You want to do that, but it's that immediate survival is not in question for some class of people. So obviously India is a very diverse country. I don't speak for everybody, but I speak for a large percentage of the population, and hopefully that number is going to grow. So that to me tells me that our triggers for taking on the first career we get in these three generations have completely changed. Number two, not only have the triggers changed, the technology is completely different. So while we were all learning till our college level, 12 or 15 years of education. Today, the whole technology allows me, fantastic platforms like yours, Instrucko, can make me a student forever. So there is the whole, this massive opportunity available for me to learn from anywhere. The Harvards and Stanfords are offering me degrees today, or I can continue my learning process.
And from anywhere in the world.
And from anywhere in the world. And it's not just any more search, it's AI and stuff like that. Generative AI. So I think that also changes. The technology has today made me a student forever. The measures of success again also need to change equally. So I find a lot of young kids are just following a career because they want to prove to their own peers or their parents that they've arrived, that they're done. And so they go, 9 to 9, 5 days of the week at least, to a job that they hate. And to me, that is really, it's a failing of a whole society when we do that. Right? That that person does not need that money so desperately as we did or our parents did.
Yeah.
So my suggestion to them is, hey, think about it.
Yeah.
Sit back and ask yourself, what is it that you want to do? Because if you continue to be on this treadmill, you will fall off it someday.
Yeah.
Because you can't be sort of deciding your next step on how to tread something when you are on a fast treadmill. So maybe sometimes you have to step off, use some time to read, learn about other alternative careers. Maybe you started wrong. It's never too late.
Yeah.
And frankly, I think as a society, we don't attach those tags anymore. Whether it's failure in a relationship, whether it's failure in the career, whether it's a pink slip. Fortunately, in our generation, all this meant suicide.
Yeah.
Right? But it doesn't anymore, and I'm very happy that it doesn't.
So, coming back to a little bit about happiness and success. So, what is the connection, between happiness and success at a workplace? Because we're talking about exactly this, that, sometimes people are doing this 9 to 9 job. What should be the connection between these two?
Yes. So, let me, when somebody says, how do you define darkness? I would say it's the absence of light, right? And some wise men said, how do you define ego? And it's the absence of knowledge. As my knowledge increases, my ego will come down, and vice versa, right? Now, similarly, so what contributes to unhappiness? For sure. I mean, happiness is a big, fuzzy, abstract concept. But I know that there are things that make everybody unhappy.
Yeah.
For example, doing things that you don't agree with is a sure cause of unhappiness. Selling something that you don't believe in yourself is a sure cause of unhappiness. Listening to a boss who you don't agree with and still having to do those things is cause of unhappiness, right? Putting on a pretense that I'm happy at a job when I'm not happy at it, not being able to say the right thing, these are all causes of unhappiness. So what is happiness? In my opinion, being able to go to a workplace where I have the freedom to do things I do. There's no absolute freedom, because after all, my freedom,
is curbed by certain processes.
Right. There will be some discipline. Somebody might say, I'm indisciplined, I don't want any structure. Wake up, right? Because discipline is nothing but, it's respect for the other people. So when I say I'm not going to follow discipline, I'm not going to follow lane discipline on road, basically means that I'm taking away the right of somebody else to travel safely, right? So if you look at it from that angle, so you need some structure, you need some organization. But I think a happy workplace is and the most important thing is that I think two things also take away from happiness, in my opinion. One is a lack of purpose. So anybody whose life he might be a very wealthy person, may have everything to take care of, has a good name in society, is an influencer, whatever they are. But if there is no purpose, in my opinion, they will end up being unhappy. The second I find with this generation even more is this sense of entitlement. So if you look at, there are kids growing up saying whatever is wrong with their lives is because of their parents or their teachers or some peer. So I think if you combine a few of the words that I said, no sense of entitlement. I am responsible for who I am today. Right? As an adult, I need to take that responsibility. That's right. So that's being sure of what my purpose is, and at the same time being sure to change this purpose as long as you are comfortable changing it. Right? So it doesn't have to be one purpose all the time, but knowing a purpose in life, and then having the discipline to pursue that purpose. Nothing will happen in a day. So have the patience, have the perseverance, and I would, to some extent, with all humility, claim that at least in our company we were able to do that. People who come from 10th standard pass, some of them not even that. We have been able to show them a roadmap, because why? I'll give you a very simple example. Every company has a suggestion scheme, right? So we do a prayer every morning at 9 o'clock. We sing the national anthem. And then Monday to Friday, we ask workers to give us suggestions. How to improve your workplace. What is a suggestion? What is an acceptable suggestion? Something that's feasible, and something that's useful. Only two things.
Correct.
So Friday evening, there's a workers committee that meets, and they decide on this one sheet of paper whether this is feasible and useful. If both, it's called an acceptable suggestion. On Saturday morning, every acceptable suggestion, there's no box, so these suggestions have to be handed over to a supervisor. The supervisor's KRA is to get more suggestions from his people. The worker's suggestion, it's not his KRA to give suggestions. Because it's a voluntary activity.
Absolutely,
right? Every Saturday morning, every accepted suggestion will get 50 rupees cash prize. And there's no limit to that. You can earn, some of our workers have earned more in suggestions than as salary. So that's the number they can. So as you walk into a factory, you'll see an electronic ticker welcoming you by your name. But below that, you also have a script running, number of sessions implemented till date. if my memory serves me right, I think yesterday's number was 68,200 suggestions.
Wow.
Have been implemented in this factory. So we have 68,200 ways to beat our competition, to deliver more value to our customers.
That's incredible.
And to me, that is the source of happiness.
Yeah.
It is not that you can pay them much more than somebody else does. You treat people with respect.
And they also feel a sense of importance and involvement. They feel like they're part of actually a decision for the greater good in some way or the other, which they would never be able to make anywhere else.
True.
Because
Very
no
true.
one will go and ask a labourer, please give me a suggestion on how to make things better. This is probably one of the only...
No, many companies do that, but
I'm
probably
sure,
there's a
but
box. Or, it's how much you implement and how much credit you give them, right? So it's very important. And also how you treat people, I think, is very important. I'm proud to say, one of my partners in crime forever has been my driver, Devinder. I think he's been with me now for almost 30 years.
Yeah.
Right? So the pact I have with him is very simple.
Yeah.
Is that, look, I don't know if you are happy being a driver, but you came to me as a driver.
Yeah.
Right? Now, I don't know if I can make you a cricketer, which is a very good player also. He plays with us sometimes.
Yeah.
But what I can promise you, and everybody can promise somebody else this, is that you try to be the best driver in the world, and I will try to be the best owner of that car in the world.
Yeah.
That pact we can have.
Yeah.
And every year we renew that pact. Either you can come, requesting me, begging me for a higher increment, or I could be very worried, hey, if Devinder goes away, my life is going to be upset because you become so important to me.
Yeah.
So I think the moment you set up such pacts, unsaid agreements with people, where they are respected, appreciated, you've given them a purpose, you've used their ingenuity. Quite frankly, even as a hard-nosed businessman, I think it's a damn good negotiation to drive.
Yeah.
And the result of that is happiness. Happy people don't leave you.
Yeah.
Happy people don't ditch you. Happy people will be with you in your good and your bad. Right?
Yeah.
So that is why I feel that pursuing happiness as a goal of a business is very, very important. And also for a selfish reason. Most businessmen, entrepreneurs in the world get into business. It's a very hard life, right? It's a lonely life sometimes. Because as employees, I can quit, I can go somewhere else. But as an owner of a business, I'm holding this, this fort, whether I like it or not, whether it's going down or coming up.
Yeah.
So in that very difficult journey, many people keep postponing their saying, I do this tough thing because 30 years from now, I'll be a rich man. My share price will be high, my children will inherit this. For whatever stupid reason, they keep postponing their happiness. Here's the bargain. At least I find that, no, I am very selfish, I want to be happy every day.
Yeah.
And I get happiness, so there's a sign that I have here which I love very much by Isaac Newton, by the way. It's a Latin thing, but it translates to saying, nature is exceedingly simple and harmonious with itself. So you can learn a lot from nature, right? What does it mean? That means if two people are having a conflict, an employee-employer are having a conflict, a husband-wife are having a conflict, friends are having a conflict, that means we are doing something which is not natural. The natural state of nature is to be in harmony. That means I am not driving, and if I'm the person who's driving that relationship, then I owe it to the relationship to bring it back to harmony. And that's what we do with our employees. It's appraisal season at Deki right now. So this is even more.
Season of conflict.
And so as Goldratt said, reduce conflicts you cannot resolve, right?
Yeah.
Conflicts you can compromise. And compromise leave you very undesirable effects, which you don't know, right? Because both people walk away from the negotiating table having shaken hands, but feeling I was shortchanged, right? That I'm sacrificing to this relationship or whatever that partnership is. But if you don't do that, reduce the conflicts to contradictions, then you can solve it.
And the generation has changed so much. I mean, obviously now there are so many youngsters who love jumping from one job to another. The concept of being in one company or happiness or success is all so vague. Where actually there's a lot of, when they come, their concept of happiness is I'm getting this incredible salary.
Right.
But even if I have to work 13, 14 hours a day and I don't have a life, it's okay because at the end of the day I can buy X, Y and Z. Also, sometimes they come thinking that, we get this incredible pay, we want this work-life balance also. But the happiness goes the minute there's some timelines, deadlines. How do you sort of implement that without, creating this conflict? Because I think it's a slippery slope. It's really hard to have that discipline and that, I guess the sense of happiness. They think that, why have I been given this timeline, or why do I need to?
No, fortunately I encountered this faith practice, Buddhism. We call it Soka Gakkai in National Bharat Soka Gakkai. But most religions or spiritual teachings will lead us there. So what you're describing as that job which gives me enough money is not happiness. You can get joy. You get joy on salary day, and then we also call it a stage of rupture.
Yeah.
So you can have this. It's like a bubble that is about to burst the moment it's born. Happiness is actually not being in that state, right? Happiness, in fact, in Buddhism also is defined as my ability to, first, the recognition that nothing is permanent.
Yeah.
Right? So gains and losses, profits and losses, cash flow constraints and no constraints. These are all like waves in the ocean, they'll come and go. Right?
Yeah.
But my ability to be able to enjoy when I'm on an up, and the ability to be able to stand up, withstand, plan for when I'm down, fall and get up again. The person who masters that is the happier person, right? Second, I don't think there is anything called happiness in the future. Because quite frankly, the only moment I'm living is now. I'm talking to you, am I enjoying this discussion? That's the important part, right? Will this discussion lead to something? I don't know. I mean, so I find that people who keep postponing happiness, that's not a plan, right? You can postpone earning a certain amount of money, buying a certain house.
Yeah.
And these are little objects, tools, not so little sometimes, important parts of what you define as your happiness.
Correct.
And I have nothing against it. That's how society works, and they should. But the journey on that way, because do remember one thing, you may or may not get to the goal.
Correct.
But we are all traveling. So if you want to be really happy, you have to learn to make your journey a happy journey. And that's, I think, just a mindset switch. It is not so difficult. It is that understanding. The moment I begin to, so I wrote a piece long back on New Year. Sometimes I write articles to my friends, and this was about the car dashboard, right? It just reminds me. Now, it is how our mind is structured. On that normal cash, and now they're getting very electronic, but a normal car dashboard, which is the biggest wheel? There are 3 wheels always there, right? 3 circles. The biggest one in every single car, since I remember, is the one indicating speed. As if that's the most important thing. On the contrary, most of the time I don't see the speed I'm traveling at. Right? So I begin to look at the speed when? Only when somebody else has overtaken me. Mostly. This is what is happening in life. The biggest dial we made is the dial of money. And most of your generation, I don't think worries so much about money because you have enough to eat, right? There is a house, either your own or provided by your parents. So it's not as dire as my parents had it. Right? But what is still happening is that I begin to look at the speed dial the moment one of my friends whizzes past. Saying, hey, that guy was an idiot in school, how is he earning more than me? Right? So happiness is, first let's look at the right measures. So the speed dial is not the most important measure. In fact, the least important measure that we don't look at is a little measure which says temperature of the engine. And we normally look at it only when it's gone to the red and the car is blown over. Right? And that is the most, that's my blood pressure. That's my health. That's my health of my relationship with people who I love. So it's not important to just say I love people, I love my family. Am I available to them? Am I, when they're growing up, am I giving them what they want to do? So I think it's that definition, as you rightly started out by saying, I think it's at school level that we need to start recalibrating these definitions. And I'm not saying anything crazy needs to be done. I just need to be made a little more conscious. If I'm pursuing a certain if there is this is my hero, I think as parents or as teachers we need to ask the question saying, what quality of this hero do you like? My son was in love with somebody at one point in time who I won't name now because poor guy is in trouble in London. But it was the flamboyant car of the guy. But you have to draw the attention of the child by saying, look, what's behind the car? Is it an arrogant businessman who's just borrowing money from people, who's not being responsible as a business? Or is it a very smart guy who decided at some point of time to put his money in the right place and is now enjoying his money as he should? That's the difference.
And I think this also stems to into a very important topic, which is failure. Like our society is really, like we associate failure with so much embarrassment and so much from the beginning, since when you're like 5-6 years old, you're failing in grades, you're passing, you're coming first, you're coming fifth, and the entire school system is just about academics. And for example, you said there are so many people who were in school who may be doing better again in the societal sense of success, which is money, etc. But failure is where I think there's a huge shift that needs to come, where when we're allowed to fail and not feel embarrassed about it, because a 10-year-old, if they fail, it's really not the end of the world.
I think it's a very important point you're touching upon. I think again it stems from this survival mentality of ours, where we didn't have enough, right? Even to survive.
Yeah.
So at that point of time, I guess parents were rightly worried that if you don't do well in school, you won't get a job, you won't be able to, and I won't be able to fend for you.
Yeah.
Right? That should change today.
Yeah.
Because I don't think the financial aspects, at least in some part of our society, are that dire. The opportunities are far more. Right?
Absolutely. I mean, jobs have changed. Back in the day, there were only so many jobs for you.
That's
now
right.
you can create your own. People
you can create your own
jobs.
and there's enough, right?
Yeah.
I mean, having said that, and we are setting up these very wrong measures of our own success, and hence what we see as failure is also very different.
Yeah.
I mean, so my father always wanted me to be first in class, and I used to also always ask him what are the other fathers are also asking their kids to do the same, right? Unfortunately, they were a little more relaxed than my dad was, but okay, that got me somewhere. But today, look at failures in relationships. Girls and boys continue to be in a marriage that for a long time, which is not getting them anywhere. Both are unhappy with it.
Yeah.
So who's the society who's sitting on judgment on my failure?
Yeah.
I think parents, their most loved ones, at the end of the day, as we moved on, one of the real losses has been that in India, at least, I remember as grandparents, they used to all live with us and we had a joint family.
Yeah.
Now we all become this nuclear family, whatever.
Yeah.
So one of the losses, in my opinion, has been that quite frankly, society that really bothers me and cares for me is very, very small. What do you say, people who I should really be concerned with? Might be my parents, must be a few friends, must be some neighbors, and that's it.
Yeah.
10, 15, 20, 100 people at max. Not the people that I invite to my wedding, which might be 500, right? So the truth is that when I fail, if I only look at those people that really I bother about in my life, who care for me and who I care for, it might be a handful of people. And I think they're the only ones who have a right to sit on judgment on my failure.
Yeah.
And truth be told, those are the people who would be the most understanding of my failure.
Well-wishers.
That's right. They will encourage me in terms of, they will hold my hand when I'm falling.
Yeah.
They will help me to stand up again. Right?
Yeah.
So again, that measure, and who are we allowing to sit on that judgment? This generation always reminds me, don't judge. Right? So I would tell the generation, yeah, you're right. And don't allow yourself to be judged.
Yeah.
Be judged by only people that you really care for, you respect, whose opinion you respect.
Yeah.
So don't be disrespectful to the other. So if you take this definition, then unfortunately a lot of kids who are getting onto addiction or having issues with how they deal with their mental status would all go away, because don't allow people to judge you on your failure. Number one. But also this is important as an industrial thing. If I want Deki to be an innovative company, one of the things culturally I have to embed is that we have to begin to ignore sometimes, acknowledge, sometimes even reward failure.
Yeah.
But if my behavior, I might give all these lectures, but if one guy makes a mistake, there is a machine that didn't work on time, there's a customer relationship that went wrong, there was something that was quoted wrongly to the customer, and I begin to come down heavy on him in a meeting with everybody else, show him down, that message goes loud and clear that this guy is only talking. He's not going to spare a mistake. So we had, for example, I remember at one point of time, that year we had 26 complaints from customers, which in my opinion were large.
Yeah.
So what I did was I took out the largest whiteboard possible that I could lay my hands on, put all the 26 complaints on that board, and put it in front of where our customers come into our factory. And my team really said that this guy's crazy, but now he's really gone crazy, because who's going to buy from a company that has 26 complaints? And my logic was simple. I said, I don't know how many complaints our competitors have, but anybody who comes in and you are owning up these 26 complaints, you have written the corrective action in front of them, the preventive action in front of them, and the name of the person who's responsible.
Yeah.
When a customer comes in and says, look, I want to talk about this one complaint, you take him to that person who's responsible, let that person explain in all details what he knows about the complaint and how he's going to make sure that it's going to be prevented.
Yeah.
That will give the customer so much confidence.
Absolutely.
But unfortunately, a lot of organizations are doing the exact reverse. They are teaching people how to brush complaints under the carpet.
Yeah.
You look at the Facebooks and the Instas today of these companies. Most products that you like to buy, go and look at one of those and you will find hundreds of complaints against some of the best known products. You know why? Because that whole company is only trying to brush them under the carpet.
Yeah.
And so don't be surprised with a culture like that. People will learn to cover up their mistakes.
Exactly.
And you as the CEO can continue to sit in your ivory tower and get your share price up. But someday this truth will be told.
Yeah.
That culture of celebrating mistakes to some extent in our company, be surprised. I think today when we started, we had annual capacity. licensed capacity, do 10 million capacitors, 1 crore per year. Today we do that much in 2.5 days. We do 4 million per day. So you can imagine the number of complaints that
have increased.
Numerically should have come.
Yeah.
But from 26 complaints, last year we were down to 6 complaints. And these 6 complaints are nothing but there was some visual or packaging complaint, not even one electrical or technical complaint. So you are able to do that not because of me at all. It's because 640 people have no fear of saying, hey, I made a mistake, this lot needs to be burnt. We need to throw these capacitors away, they're no good.
Yeah.
Otherwise, these lots will find their way to the customer because somebody is too scared to tell the bad news.
Yeah, absolutely.
The same thing has happened in American society. Today you have an Elon Musk, you have a Microsoft, a Google out of that country. Why don't we have them out of our country? Because the stock markets in those countries don't punish those people. In India, that guy would have been in jail long back.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying that businesses who are not responsible don't need to be jailed, but sometimes there are genuine failures.
Yeah.
When you aim for the peak, there will be people who will fall.
Absolutely.
As a society, I think we need to forgive some of them, celebrate some of them, acknowledge some of them.
Yeah.
So I think this failure is a very important part of,
yeah,
and it must change.
And now it has, I mean, people, all these big entrepreneurs, you know, they're like, this is my third startup, 2 of my first startups failed, and they are trying to sort of normalize it, but I still think it's at a very superficial level because they only come out and say it once they become successful.
Correct.
You know, when they're failing, no one is saying, they're not talking about it. So I think again, like there's a huge sense of responsibility that needs to come up, even with people who are doing something that, look, yeah, this didn't work, and you own up to it only when it's happening rather than doing it once you're successful. So my last question, you know, is what is your advice for youngsters looking for, because see, now we're in a generation of instant gratification. It's a very different world from, you know, I mean, I was so surprised that people in your office have been factory and worked for 30 years. I mean, you barely go to any places now where, you know, you hear that the employees been there. So what is your advice for youngsters looking at, you know, a career which is a long-term career of happiness, more importantly?
Yeah, so I think each one needs to figure out, like I said, I know in your generation you won't think of 30 years. I was not thinking of, I never knew I'm going to be alive for so long, right? Because out of college you have a goal only for 10 years.
Yeah.
Fair enough. But I'm saying don't have it for 1 year.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't make sense. You won't get anywhere in 1 year.
Yeah.
Right? Even Virat Kohli who decided to play cricket will be able to only get to some stage where he can look like a hero in 5, 6, 10 years, right? And that too, there's a lot of hard work to get wherever he has got, right? So whatever career you're pursuing, the good thing today is that, quite frankly, you wouldn't know. I didn't know as a hotelier that I would become an engineering company CEO, right? Or an electronics business would be led by me. Having said that, I did know that this roadmap of happiness, as I call it, I mean, I was not that clear then, to be honest. That clarity comes with a certain period of time. But we need to set some goals. Maybe there is a goal in terms of the money I want to earn. There is a goal in terms of the designation, but there should be and these goals are quite clear to this generation, the younger generation. But there is also a goal of the value I will create. At the end of the day, and I love this word value, is that what value do I represent to my employer? If I have a goal for this is the amount of money I want to earn. Why? Because my friend is earning more than this, right? Now that's not the benchmark that you should be setting, right? Benchmark should be, I want to be earning this money because I think I'm worth it.
Yeah.
Why am I worth it? Because this is the value, this is the skill
I bring to the table, yeah.
So, and who will help me to bring that value? If it's company A today or company B today, I might have to sacrifice something for this value.
Yeah.
It might be a tough boss. It might be very tough systems. It might be discipline that I'm not used to. But then I'm quite clear that I'm going to do this for 3 years because that is the value that I want to earn for myself.
Yeah.
And at least in that statement of value, have integrity. Don't do this for somebody else.
Yeah.
If I think that I'm going to be a good marketing manager, in my heart I should know I'm very, very good at what I do. You know, and whichever company helps me to get there. And today, fortunately, again, failure or leaving a job early is not really considered a bad thing.
Yeah.
But don't do it too often because then you're wasting your time, right?
Yeah.
So at least for your own selfish reason, I would say choose a career, be with it, persevere with it for some time. But the good thing today is if you think you got it wrong, you can always change it.
Yeah. And I know I said that was my last question, but one last one is, what books do you recommend? Are there any, because, you know, obviously you said you didn't know what this meaning, the true meaning of happiness in your career was early on because the generation was very different then, and now we have the luxury to read more. There's so much information available. but it's very important to have the right type of information. So what books do you recommend? Any practices, any books that will actually help the generation today implement it from a very early age, so that they don't have to struggle eventually to figure out, that I did this for 10 years and I'm so unhappy?
No, so there are several that come to mind. And my reading list is fairly boring. It's more fact. There's almost no fiction in it. But what I would discuss, so I wouldn't name books, but what I learned is, alert learning. And fortunately, when I did this training program that I described to you earlier, there was a lot of need for me to understand how adult minds learn. And I read a book about it, which was very interesting. And so this is basically a iterative process, if I may call it, between theory and practice. Now, so it's easier to describe maybe with an example of, let's say, a football player, right? I mean, so there are things that he knows how he does, there are some skills he's good at.
Yeah.
And when he applies those skills to the ground, many players just learn on the ground.
Yeah.
But the smarter ones go back home, look at the video, and they try and say, what could have I done differently? And if that skill is going to come to me from a new coach, from a new way of a different exercise in the gym, a different routine, a different nutrition, then I'm going to do that. So we recalibrate that experience. Unfortunately, when we are in the corporate world, in the business world, very few people do this. So if I'm negotiating with a customer today, did it go well or not?
Yeah.
Do I spend 5 minutes at the end saying,
just
reflecting on it and saying, hey, it didn't go well. And if 2 or 3 negotiations are not going well, it may not mean that I didn't get the price I wanted. It may mean that the guy got off the table not feeling very happy about it. That's important. I mean, to me, a win-win is so that's also the books you read are very important. I remember my son is reading a book called on negotiation. It says, never settle halfway, right? So what does that mean? It means that if I'm wanting to pay $80 for something and you want to sell it for 100, 90 is the, so if I pay any more than 90, I should feel terrible. And if you pay any less than 90, if you sell it to me for anything, you should feel bad. But who's setting these boundaries? These are very silly, I must say, American ideas on negotiation. It depends on what I'm negotiating. If it's a relationship I'm negotiating, which has gone to long term, quite frankly, I don't care. I want to build a relationship with you today.
Absolutely.
And I will tell you that openly. Look, your relationship is far more valuable than the discussion today. Let's leave this transaction. Tell me whatever price you want to give me. I will take a loss because I pay more attention there. So it depends on the context. So that's why if a negotiation has not gone well for me, intuitively what I do now is I will read something on negotiation. It may not be a book. It may be 3 or 4 different views on negotiation.
And there's so many podcasts available.
And the moment I begin to do this, you will find that you will automatically become a little more conscious at the next negotiation. I'm not saying I'll become an expert in negotiation. But if I called in a person, I criticized him, I gave him negative feedback, and I felt it didn't go right, again I need to go back to something, how to give good feedback. I didn't speak well at a public function by my standards. How am I going to improve on that? So I think it's this constant learning. Don't give it up.
Of consciousness.
That's right. So if there is a skill that I would like to give to to your audience, it's this. Be conscious of where you are. Be true to yourself. Don't think you're a hero when you're not. Right? Sometimes you get it by fluke. Know that it was by fluke. You don't need to tell everybody else. But then that process is extremely important. The process where your goal is happiness. You have the patience. You have the value systems of, like I said, at least being true to yourself and not others. That would stand you in good stead.
Great. Thank you so much. I think I have learned personally so much from this. I'm going to implement a few things in my business as well. I think Instrucko definitely needs a suggestion box for sure. And I'm sure everyone's going to enjoy watching this. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I enjoyed speaking with you.